All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're joined here today by a bunch of awesome Maker people and general people who are interested in MakerDAO. Today is the 210th Governance and Risk meeting. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am one of the governance facilitators here. Really happy to be having another weekly call with you guys today. Hello if you're watching the recording. Before we get too into business, let's go over a few ground rules. As usual, let's try not to talk over one another. There's a couple tools you can use that'll help that. First of which is the raised hand reaction, I guess you'd say, on Zoom. Got a desktop, just click that little arrow for reactions, as David is demonstrating now. That helps me form like a speakers list. So if you raise your hand and someone finishes their comment, I can call on you. Likewise, if you're unable or unwilling to hop on the mic, you can drop your comment or question in the chat. We'll try to work it in at a reasonable time. You guys should know the rest. It's an open meeting. Come here, ask questions, drop your comments, participate, and be respectful of one another. You know, pretty much kindergarten rules, plus we're recording on Zoom. All right, if you want to take us to the next slide, Thomas, we can get into the agenda. Cool. So as usual, we'll start with our governance roundup, going over the votes, what's happening in the land of MIPs. Those are our maker improvement proposals. And finally, an update for what has been going on in the forum. Huge thanks to our people coming on to present our initiative updates. We have dSpot, who's going to show us a little bit on their parameter dashboard they've been working on. And then we got a last minute big announcement here at MakerDAO that Strategic Finance has offered to come disclose and talk us through a little bit. That is the Gemini GUSD PSM offer. A bunch of fancy acronyms, but that's Gemini stablecoin that we have in our peg stability module, helping us keep that tight $1 peg to die. And then finally, we're going to be diving into MIP 82. That is the Monetalis Appaloosa, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, MIP. So we have Alan from Monetalis here to give us the details. We can compare it to what we've been talking about before, the Coinbase MIP 81 proposal, and just have an open Q&A with any leftover time. All right, that is enough words. Let's get on to the meaningful stuff. So votes. Fairly quiet in the maker governance side in terms of what's live right now. It's just one active green light poll. That is the RFA, Canadian Federally Regulated Mortgage Originator poll. So voting does end Monday there. Please make sure you express your opinion if you have one. In terms of concluded polls, we did have 2 weekly polls that ended just before this call. Both of those passed. Those were the collateral option parameter updates from risk. A lot of collateral update parameters there, so I won't list them all, but do check out that proposal. We'll be seeing it on executives here shortly. And then the other poll that passed was the updating Rocket Pool ETH onboarding parameters. A lot of people in the Maker community know that we've been working on our ETH onboarding for a little bit of time here. So long that we decided we needed to update the parameters before we get it live. But the good news is we're slated to get rolling with that in October. And finally, we had 6 ratification polls conclude on Monday. So I will leave that to our MIP editors in our next segment to give you the good juicy details there. You go to the next slide, I'll tell you about our executive proposals. This week's executive has already passed and is pending execution. That had the update to the proxy actions end proper contract address, the start net bridge deposit limit increase, and the core unit MKR vesting for a number of Cs there. Next week, we're looking at our Monetalis onboarding with a 1 billion pilot, 1 million DAI deposit pilot. We have CU MKR transfers and streams for Gov Alpha, StarkNet, and oops, I put CES. That was from last week. It is SES. Sorry about that there. And lastly, we have an SPF transfer for the ambassador program. All right, I'm tired of hearing myself fumble over words, so I will pass off the mic for our MIPS update.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Can you hear me? Cool. Nice. So hello, everyone. Pablo here with the MIPS updates. We had 6 ratification polls for the September cycle, and they just closed on Monday. Let's take a look at the results. So two proposals did not pass, namely the Maker DAO delegates MIPS set, which aim to formalize delegates and their compensation within the MIPS framework, and the offboarding of the strategic happiness core unit. 4 proposals did pass though. The MKR budget for 𝘰𝘬𝘪𝘶, whose winning option was the 1.5 multiplier, and the MKR budget for this darknet engineering core unit. We also had an amendment for MIP 61, the delegate compensation MIP, which was accepted. It replaces the fixed start date with a rolling window for the calculation of participation metrics. And we had a special purpose fund for 81,000 DAI to fund further work from the ambassador program team. Now moving on to the proposals in RFC, and by the way, the frozen period started today, so eligible proposals must remain unchanged if they are to be formally submitted for the October cycle. I will not be exhaustive in the interest of saving time. The proposals I made have not been active in the recent past. So we have the endgame related proposals, with the exception of the offboardings and the withdrawn MIP 85. All of these proposals will be bundled into a single ratification poll. In the first column, we have MIP 83, recognize launch MetaDAO clusters, MIP 84, activate protocol-owned fault emulation, MIP 85, Lido to MKR OTC swap, which was withdrawn, and MIP 4C4 SP1, which is a proposal to remove MIPs 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12, all related to collateral onboarding. In the second column, we have MIP 4C2 SP27, which restricts signal requests to those triggered and required by ratified MIPs. MIP 1C4 SP1, which changes the problem space, that is the ratified list of goals/issues for the DAO. Now, coordinate mandate changes for collateral engineering services, risk, and strategic finance, and coordinate offboardings for events, real-world finance, and strategic happiness. As for non-endgame MIPs, in the first column we have MIP 80, the MKR compensation guidelines, MIP 81, Coinbase USDC institutional rewards, which will transfer 1/3 of the PSM's USDC into Coinbase custody to earn rewards. MIP 82, Monetalis Coinbase Appaloosa, one of the discussion topics for this call. MIP 86, CoinShares USDC institutional rewards, which aims to establish a collaboration between CoinShares and Maker, whereby CoinShares will manage about 13% of the PSM's USDC and invest it. In the second column, we have a new budget for the DAX core unit, a special purpose fund to fund legal domain work to onboard Black Tower credit. Thank you. And an amendment to modify the facilitator offboarding process. The proposals that will enter the November cycle at the earliest will do so because they've not fulfilled their periods yet, or because their authors have decided otherwise, or because they must wait for a budget submission window to open. Finally, we have a special purpose fund for 50,000 DAI to pioneer a DeFi native database for modeling sentiment-driven dynamics and risks. This proposal can enter the weekly governance cycle on October the 3rd at the earliest. And I leave with a reminder that the October formal submission window opens on Monday, October the 3rd. And that's pretty much all from me. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Huge thanks to Pablo, one of our MIP editors, for putting that together. I really appreciated all the tags and additional information on the screen. Awesome. We're going to hand off the mic now to Artem from the Governance Communications Core unit to tell us what's going on in the forum. Oh, you are muted, Artem. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Nice and early. Yeah, just posted the link. This week's forum recap going over September 21st to the 28th, which was yesterday. and we'll begin with our announcements, and starting off with a warm welcome to our newest recognized delegate, 𝘧𝘪𝘴, who provide research and risk assessments for DeFi lending and borrowing protocols. And the 𝘧𝘪𝘴 platform consists of 3 members who support diligent risk frameworks, such as implementing a bad debt dashboard that they created, which can help shed light on risk management. And additionally, they hope to gain some hands-on technical knowledge and provide some assistance with the MakerDAO DSS system. So check out the delegate platform if you're looking for more information on their core values, their delegate and vision statements, which are provided, and also previous contributions that they made to MakerDAO and the DeFi ecosystem. And finally, 𝘧𝘪𝘴 will be presenting their delegate platform at an upcoming Meet Your Delegate call, which will probably be announced shortly if it hasn't been already. And yeah. And next up, we had a series of changes that were made to this week's executive proposal. The biggest update was the removal of actions pertaining to onboarding Monetalis, and GovAlpha's concerns stemmed from the CFTC civil enforcement action against 𝘰𝘰𝘮𝘬𝘳𝘰𝘮𝘬, whoops. And this event made the team extra cautious of having a US citizen such as Peyton on the committee. So the solution that was agreed on was to have Monetalis observe the executive spell, and thereby making the formation of a committee no longer necessary. And the second update applies to the Starknet bridge, where the Starknet team has asked to hold off on the executive adjustments until fast withdrawals are in place. And so in conclusion, yesterday's executive only included the bridge deposit limit from 50 to 1,000 DAI, as recently mentioned. And next up, we have just a quick announcement. StableNode has been working on various research that aims to provide a common framework for assessing DeFi governance standards. And they posted a short survey that includes a small bounty of, I believe, 10 USDC for anyone interested in contributing. And let's move on to our active signal requests. There's currently 1 signal request that's swimming around the forums at the moment. And Risk and the Maker Open Market Committee submit a request to modify the D3M framework. The last time this was revisited was about a year ago, which set the official D3M parameters and the MOMC guidance. And given the recent merge and the declining stake thief risk factors, the risk core unit reviewed the current framework and found a couple of things, such as the target borrow rate parameter guidance is currently very restrictive against deploying funds into the Aave D3M. Also, given Aave's DAI borrow rate, existing guidance would not result in any DAI to be currently deployed. Additionally, the effective DAI borrow rate at Aave is below Maker's 𝘰𝘱 rate, and Aave's interest-bearing wrapped 𝘰 collateral can be borrowed, while Maker 𝘰 vault collateral cannot, exposing Aave users to risk of losing collateral. So in response to these concerns, the signal request proposes 2 questions to the community. One is whether to adjust collateral yield weight calculations for D3M by removing 𝘰 supply yield and liquidity incentives. And the other one is whether to adjust the allowed spread between the target borrow rate and the 𝘰 stability fee by voting for any of the 5 given options, which range from negative 0.5%, which is the current guidance, all the way up to positive 1%. And now the signal runs until October 6th. And at the moment, the leading votes are to remove 𝘰 supply yields and liquidity incentives, as well as raise the spread to positive 0.5%. So yes, go check it out and vote on the signal if you can. And that's it for the forum recap for the GNR. There's some more stuff on the actual forum recap post, which includes some more announcements, discussions, more information on the signal request, and any initiatives and help wanted. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks for that comprehensive look, Artem. We do have one more signal that got posted right before the call, so we're going to cover that in our initiative updates. And there is one MIP to add as well. I want to make sure that gets into the recording. I just dropped a link in the chat. Should be one of our recognized delegates did have a separate facilitator offboarding proposal for real world finance. Just didn't want any confusion there that is an eligible MIP as well, and does have a clause in there on what to do should both that one and Rune's MIP pass. So quick erratum there, and on with the show. Now, I'll take us to the next slide. We will go to our initiative updates, and I believe we're going to start with Adrian from dSpot to talk about the parameter webpage. To facilitate this, Thomas, if you wouldn't mind, stop sharing your screen, and then we can give the power over to Adrian.
Okay, thanks. Just a quick check. Do you hear me well?
Loud and clear. One second here, and we'll get you on. All right, should be good to share now.
Okay, perfect.
Take it away.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. So my team has been working in the last, let's say, 2 years together with several members of MakerDAO, supporting several the creation of several dashboards, and some of you may recall, of course, the creation of the MIPs portal that was created by the team. We have recently also worked together with the SES in the creation of the expenses dashboard with information of the core units. And well, we are bringing to the community a dashboard where basically we have we present and give information on the several parameters of the Maker protocol. Well, the dashboard, just to describe highly which are the main objective of the page and of the site and what we intend to accomplish with it. First is to allow users to find the current values of the different parameters in the protocol, as well as the smart contracts that contain or manage them, as well as the parameter changes. So basically allow users to find exactly which parameter are going to be affected by an executive spell. Also to display the different historical values related to a given parameter, how it has been affected around the time, and also to provide information on these parameters, basically to link to whole series of documents that have been created by GovAlpha, where it is described and explain the purpose of the different parameters in the protocol. So I'm going to make a quick demonstration on the site. Please bear in mind that it still is in the final phase, but it's still a little of work in progress. There are still some final polishing to do, but in the coming days that should be done and will be presented to the community. So this is the main page of the site, basically an overview page where we have general information of the protocol, the different, the most important parameters, collaterals from which DAI was generated, as well as some of its parameters. And then this overview page presents the most important parameters in the protocol. So by category. And as you see, together with each parameter, we have a series of links. That's wherever we have a parameter, later you will note also on the collaterals, this appears. The first link is taken to the parameter change log, where basically we can see the historic changes of that specific parameter, in which transaction was changed. So it is linked to 𝘧𝘪𝘃 and as well as the source contract. So this is just an example of it. And also, wherever we have one of the parameters, you can see that we have a link to a documentation. And this is still a work in progress, as I mentioned, but we are linking to several, well, basically to the documents created, as I mentioned, by GovAlpha, where it describes each one of the parameters, its purpose. So the idea is to serve, of course, the community and to help to understand better what each parameter is about. Then the site has also a page called spells or changelog, where it is displayed all the executed spells and also other smart contracts that perform changes on the parameters for any given, in this case, spell. Here you can see which parameter were modified, which was the previous value of that parameter, which is the new value after this executed, of course, was executed. And then we have the collateral page, where we basically are listing all the collaterals in the protocol, but we have a series of smart, let's say, filters. These filters right now are being controlled by GovAlpha. Basically, they can set this to what is considered more useful for the view. So right now you can see here the most significant collaterals, also stable coins, reward assets, and you could of course combine them and see several of them together. And also we could display more or less parameters on each collateral here. The view offers a little functionality which permits to basically select one of the parameters and see, well, it kind of highlighted through all the other collaterals to make comparisons. And as mentioned before, each one of them is, well, wherever there is a parameter, you could jump to see the documentation of that parameter and the changes that that parameter has had. So as you see, quite straightforward, but very useful, and hopefully, yeah, the idea is to put it out, or is kind of a first release. So bear in mind, have that in mind. There are still further work to do, but we want, of course, to start receiving feedback from the community. So in the coming days, I will be doing posting, well, basically making the presentation in the forum once we have the site. If you see, we still don't have the site under a final domain. We'll have that soon, and then we'll make the presentation on the forum for all the community to be able to access and to start giving us feedback. Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate you walking us through that, Adrian. We'll open it up to questions. I did see one from Nadia in the chat asking, what's the difference between this and Maker Burn? I don't know if you have an opinion there, Adrian. If not, I'm happy to answer.
Gracias, Pablo.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't mind having that added to Maker Burn if that's something that he wishes to do. But kind of the thrust for this site was more of a focus on historical parameters, specifically so we could see what changed when and what batches of changes that it occurred in. So it's kind of our hope that this would display that data a little easier and make it so, you know, obviously we're one stakeholder as GovAlpha. It makes it a lot easier for our job for verifying when items go up for polls. For instance, if we're able to see all the items as they are currently, as well as when they were changed. So part motivated by that, but I also think it's going to be a pretty useful site for the general populace in terms of determining, like, okay, oh, I want to make a signal request to have this outcome. Well, what was the last time we changed it, and what was the result of doing so? Now you'll be able to really easily go in there, see when it was changed, what happened since that change, and even look at the spell that did it. Any other questions while we have Adrian here? Awesome. Well, we really appreciate the time and look forward to giving you some more feedback on this dashboard when it goes live. How flexible can it be changed, I guess, is a good question. I don't know if you want to address that, Adrian.
Yeah. So we created a document. It's really a YAML file, which permits to modify the several, let's say, friendly names, icons as well, because we cannot get this the icon for the different collaterals from the blockchain. So right now it should be modified directly on GitHub, though there are information on how to do this. And basically it's a YAML file, so YAML is a much more readable format than, let's say, modifying the source code. It has also it updates automatically when there is a new parameter added to the collateral, so it's using an updated list of all the different contracts in the protocol, and from it detects when there is a new collateral added. It's going to be shown automatically, but it could require to go, let's say, to the YAML file and add, let's say, a new icon for it, and maybe a friendly name as well. That's of course is most of the time is not is not living on the blockchain at this moment.
Yeah, especially for some of those pooled assets, you can get some pretty wild names. Need some human input in there. Yeah, and thanks for asking the questions there, Dia, one of our recognized delegates. All right, Adrian, I think that does it. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and present for us, and yeah, look forward to seeing this live.
Thanks all.
Awesome. Thomas, I see you already got the slides back up. Thanks for that. If you take us to the next one, awesome. I was going to make a joke here that I don't know who from strategic finance gets to present the good news. So who will be talking today?
I think it'll be me for once.
Take it.
Yeah. So how to do this? This is a bit impromptu because everything's sort of flown very quickly on top of each other, but I don't have screen sharing.
Okay, Thomas, if you don't mind, stop sharing. I'll get you co-host and we'll be good to go. And you should have permissions now.
Great. Sorry, so you can see this now?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. So I think it's worth just going through a few slides really quickly. Forgive me if this seems a little bit improvised because it is, but I thought it would be useful to put together a little bit of context before we go into the details of the GUSD proposal, and we can talk about, yeah, ideally open the floor to as many questions as possible. So for the context of this, so these slides are a little bit out of date, but essentially the message is, if you follow the strategic finance financial reports, you'll be familiar with this page, which decomposes the interest income that we make out of the maker system. And it's a little bit out of date, and it's unfortunate. I mean, it hasn't gotten that much worse, but it's pretty much been this for like another 2 months. And the story is that of the assets that we have on our balance sheet, the largest portion of that allocation is essentially earning a return of 0%, and that's the PSM. So, you know, you may or may not like the idea of having a PSM, but whether that is pegged to the dollar or whether it's pegged to a plank of wood, it should be invested according to the asset that it's tracking, and the balance sheet should be managed correctly. So insofar as we have a peg to the dollar, then we should be earning a positive ROA on our balance sheet in order to not just generate profits for the maker system, but have a sustainable stablecoin that can pay for, liquidity risk events, meet DAI redemptions, and so forth. There are current solutions that are a very good start. So MIP65 is an excellent first step because it provides the most yield in a risk-free way, with the caveat that it has an upper bound, unfortunately, because at the moment we can't unwind it quickly. So we face the risk of a redemption crunch. And so this limits how much we can allocate to MIP65 today. Although, of course, this could change as the liquidity on MIP65 improves. And so what our balance sheet looks like today is essentially an incomplete puzzle, and is today essentially our greatest weakness. So having underinvested assets are the sort of thing that lead to operating losses for a balance sheet driven business. However, we are starting to make a good progress on finding proposals that can invest the balance sheet correctly. And in this, GUSD is the one that we're going to talk about today, because it's the first one that has zero block liquidity. So when you think about investing the assets, it will always be a trade-off between liquidity and yield. And our aim will obviously be to have as much liquidity as possible and as much yield as possible, given that constraint. So MIP65 we positioned here because it has a slightly longer duration, a slightly lower liquidity, but obviously much higher yield. GUSD, its proposal lands here because it has zero block liquidity. In other words, the GUSD and the PSM don't move for this proposal to work. There's no change of custody, and we still earn incentives, and it's still nevertheless a formula to earn incentive. And with that, I think we can loop into the FAQs as I just give a brief overview of how this will work mechanically. So the gist of the proposal is that Gemini is offering a fixed 1.25 annualized rate on any balance in the GUSD PSM for the next 3 months, calculated and paid on a monthly basis, provided the balance in the GUSD PSM is over $100 million. For GUSD, this is quite an interesting proposal because they've struggled to keep their PSM filled for a variety of reasons, and they are integrated with DeFi, but they are looking for deeper integration with the DeFi ecosystem. So for them, this is a way to take a step in that direction. We put together these two diagrams to show mechanically what this might look like. So as it looks like, there will probably have to be an entity representing the Maker protocol onboarding onto Gemini and opening an account. And that entity will have GUSD credited as sort of incentive. And then this entity will then be instructed by Maker governance to deposit the GUSD into the surplus buffer. And you can imagine that this could look something like how the DSS below contract works today, where you deposit the GUSD onto a permissionless contract, it swaps it out for DAI in the BSM, and then deposits DAI and joins the DAI in the surplus buffer. And so the net effect of this is that we essentially have an allocation to GUSD, assuming it's greater than $100 million, we will be earning an annualized rate of 1.25% for the next 3 months, which incentivizes Maker governance. The theory is that it should incentivize Maker governance to adjust the parameters to make sure that the GUSD PSM is filled. And I suspect over the long run, Gemini hopes that it will start replacing, as a unit of dollar account on chain, other sources of centralized stablecoins such as USDP or USDC. I don't see the chat or anything like this, so I'm just gonna dip in. So GUSD rate is lower than Coinbase USDC, yes. However, it is also much more liquid. And this is the trade-off that we are alluding to. So it's very close, actually. Tantalizingly close. If Coinbase is watching this, it's very close. It's too close. No, unfortunately, GUSD is not more liquid than USDC. No, the GUSD proposal is more liquid than the Coinbase USDC proposal. The Coinbase USDC proposal would have the USDC in Coinbase's custody, which is objectively less liquid than GUSD that sits in the DSM. GUSD is obviously a lot smaller and a lot more illiquid than USDC on chain. Paper mentions, seems hard to justify the Coinbase USDC one if that amount could just be shoved into the GUSD PSM and not lose control. This is a choice up to the maker token holder. So how long to liquidate a $1 billion USD position? What we might do is ask if people from Gemini are open to having a community call to go over technical questions such as these. In practice, I imagine that if you redeem directly with Gemini, it shouldn't take very long. However, on chain, as Tadeo points out, it will probably be very difficult at the moment. Yeah, as the paper says, if we have an entity, you'd redeem, and if market makers are arbitraging this liquidation, then they would presumably also redeem with Gemini directly.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk about it now. So I think it's when we say we have to redeem to basically be fully liquid here, that means that the main argument for GUSD, which is that it's so liquid, is actually in the worst case not really holding up so well, right?
So it depends. If you assume that there are enough market participants who are able to interact with Gemini, in theory, there's no limit to the liquidity because they could just redeem to Gemini. But this is a consideration that we have to take into account when setting the debt ceiling for sure, because we can't necessarily fully calculate assuming off-chain parameters. We have to think of on-chain parameters. However, you can imagine that if you do allocate greater liquidity to GUSD and start that liquidity, then over time, that liquidity should also improve. Yes, and it's true that Maker does actually need an entity, so you could, in theory, rely on that entity to just redeem.
And then I see a question.
Proposal. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Go ahead. You got it.
Yes, so Gemini's proposal doesn't ask about specific TIN or tau values. This is up to maker governance, and the risk core unit will have a view and will rely on them to figure out the appropriate way to fill this DSM should this be something that maker governance wants to do.
I was just gonna shout out that Seb did drop the signal request affecting the parameters for the GUSD PSM vault in the chat.
Yep.
So yeah, do make sure you vote on that. That is a quicker signal than usual, given the time frame you need to act on this if that is supported by the community.
So a few questions. So David, however, for Coinbase rewards, if we custody the USDC in a smart contract that maker governance has control over, which is a possibility, then you could argue that it is as liquid as the Gemini proposal. I think the devil is in the details here. It's definitely a possibility that is loaded with Coinbase, but there's no, I know that you guys are working on figuring this out. And if you do, I think it would be great. I think to the extent that maker governance is able to control the smart contract within one block, probably yes. But even then, as long as Coinbase has some kind of key on that smart contract, it's arguably less controlled. Then Boca, will the maker entity be custodying the GUSD? No. The GUSD will just sit in the DSM.
Awesome. Well, we seem to be. No, no. Here comes more questions. I had a feeling there might be more. I can read off the first one for you. Get a little back and forth, Adrian. All right. From Kianga, one of our recognized delegates. She asks, can you explain what is in this signal request and how it relates to the Gemini proposal? Seems like a good question.
So, yeah. So the signal request is the kickstart to ask Maker governance whether they would like to start changing the parameters to make it possible to fill the GUSD PSM, which at the moment has a debt ceiling of 60 million DAI, and I believe has other parameters such as gap and TTL that would make it quite slow to fill if we try to increase the debt ceiling too quickly. And so that's it's directly related to the Gemini proposal. It's to allow the PSM to reach the intended debt ceiling to make this worthwhile.
In the tout, oh yeah, go for it, Kianga.
Hi, yeah, just thank you, Adrian. I just wanted to understand the sequencing since I haven't had a chance to read everything yet. Wouldn't we? So we're signaling before we're voting on the proposal.
So the good thing. Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, I just want to understand what if yeah, just sort of like sequentially. It sounds like you're signaling something. You're asking governance to make a change based on a proposal that we've not yet opined on.
Right. So as paper is pointing out, this is not a governance proposal because GUSD is already onboarded, and Gemini are free to offer incentives to partners in the ecosystem, which is what they are doing in this instance. They are literally just offering the money, like an incentive or reward, if you will. And so this signal request is the first step to making sure that we can action that reward. So the governance action here is the parameter change, if you will. The proposal from Gemini is theirs to make it. We can ignore it, I suppose, and then we wouldn't get anything.
And I call it Patrick, my other governance facilitator's comment in the chat, like assuming if we were to hit that 100 million average that is required for the incentives, then we would need an entity to be approved by Maker governance to receive the interest. That's like the next governance action. Other than this, that would need to take place if the community supports it.
Yep.
And I saw your hand go down, Raphael, so maybe that addressed your question, but if not,
yeah, exactly. That was kind of my question. So I think basically what you just summarized, that even if we approved it now, we would still not receive anything because we don't have the receiving entity. And then, yeah.
No, they have said that they will account for it, right? So keep a note on a piece of paper and wait for us to get ready. Hopefully we won't take more than a month. And then Tim Black says, can anyone speak to the negative tin? So this change has already been pushed by protocol engineering earlier this summer in preparation for deals like this. So this is something that's obviously we've been planning and working on for a very long time. But it still needs to go through audits. So it's not ready. The negative tin parameter is not ready to be deployed in production yet. But it would be an example of a type of parameter change that we could leverage to manage our allocation. So,
And just for anyone who's watching and may be confused, tin and tout are our parameters that kind of govern fees for when an asset is coming into Maker's custody, when it's going out. So the signal proposes raising the tout, basically making it more expensive to pull GUSD out of Maker's control if it were to pass.
So piece of paper, which is definition of money, I guess, based on trust. This is just me being a bit facetious. I think if we can always ignore it. There's no budget required. There's no legal review. There's no agreement other than the terms of service that the entity scrolls down and clicks accept on when they open a Gemini account. That's it. And then they just need to know how to do an ERC20 transfer, which the entities that we've created in the context of things like MIP65 already know how to do. Yeah. The idea of this is to find as much yield as we can with as little compromise to liquidity as possible. So if you think of this allocation kind of like a barbell, you should have a very large allocation to very liquid vaults or assets, such as the PSM, and you can afford to have an allocation in things like MIP65, which is where you can earn a decent amount of yield. This is one side of the barbell, the more liquid side. So, you know, you can expect that the yields, the returns aren't going to be as interesting as getting unhedged, like direct exposure to US Treasuries. But then again, we do need to maintain an adequate level of liquidity to meet DAI redemptions. And to the extent that we can do that, plus earn a yield, is extremely beneficial. And we are, yes, as Tadeo and paper say, we are already the biggest holder of USDT. We are already the biggest holder of USDC. And the only way that USDC has figured out to make incentives pass through is through this custody agreement. And that was Coinbase, not Circle, incidentally.
Patrick has a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sorry, go on. Go on.
I was just going to ask, does GUSD have a blacklist function like USDC does?
I presume they do, yeah.
Yeah, every single fiat-backed stablecoin does. I know people think that Tether doesn't either, but Tether actually is blacklisted more addresses than Circle. It's just, that's what these regulated entities have to deal with.
So to Boca's point, we we already know how to do this in the context of MIP65. If there are any special considerations in relation to the structure of this deal, but none occur to me. Now, if anything should change, we would obviously notify the community.
Yeah, take it away, Raphael, one of our recognized delegates from Flipside.
Could you or someone else walk us through like what it would take to form that entity, like how the process would look and how much would be involved until we get to that point?
Yeah, like paper says, we already have a number of entities that are possible.
We can reuse them.
That's one alternative. Another alternative is to go through an arranger, which would imply either an existing or a new entity. I'm just going to look for, I swear there's a diagram of the entities for MIP65, which kind of shows what it might look like, but just much simpler because there's no outflow of funds.
Did you say you wanted to share that? Sorry, Adrian.
I'm just looking through it in the forums, but it might take a while.
Yeah, so basically, just top level, it's not a big deal to get that up and running.
You can imagine something like an orphan foundation company type structure in a jurisdiction like Caymans or BVI that has directors that take instructions from maker governance on chain votes or something to that effect, but I'm not in the weeds on this.
Cool. Noting some of the chat, the entity question is still to be decided and we'll need a governance vote when we're ready to do that. So we'll likely have more discussion later.
It could be, ideally, it would be something as simple as a signal request, but I'm also not a governance nerd. So I think the idea of these is to make it as light touch as possible. Yeah, like Alan says, not a big deal. And exactly, all the patterns are well known. Alan is deeply familiar with them. So yeah.
And I guess from the governance end, it is potentially more lightweight than other partnerships, right? Because we're only going to be receiving interest, receiving money, kind of, quote unquote, yeah, for free. I guess some people might object to that, but since we're only receiving that interest, we're kind of deeming an entity we trust to continue to pass it on to us, rather than taking any risk with our current assets.
And look, there's no legal agreement in place. There's no, I mean, Robert says we need to stay away from legal discussions. There are no legal discussions, right? This is the whole point. If Gemini don't pay, we change the parameters. It's that simple. Everything stays on chain in the PSM.
Awesome. Well, I know Alan's waiting to get ready to talk about his myth here in a bit. So
yeah,
really appreciate you putting this together so quickly, Adrian. And yeah, let's keep the chat going on the forums on this. So this was just announced right before this call, so plenty more discussion to be had.
Yeah, but yeah, there is, to Robert's point, there is no deal or legal structure is necessary in this instance. But yeah, thanks. We'll vote on the signal request.
Yeah, thanks. All right, Thomas, if you mind taking us to the next slide. We'll get into our discussion segment today, and then we have Alan from Monetalis here to talk a little bit about MIP 82. Alan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure, of course. Can you hear? This is okay? You can hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, good. So, yeah, of course. I think really it's mainly questions. I'm very happy to take any questions. I can give you a few seconds of background here. For MIP 65, we were actually setting up a relationship with Coinbase, and at that point in time, they started talking about various different options for how to collaborate more. And one of the things that came out of that was basically this particular situation. I think this is in effect a let's call it a real world asset version of a 𝘰𝘂𝘃, you know. And I know growth and we've also offered, why don't you just go straight up and do a 𝘰𝘂𝘃 instead? Just put in collateral and then you can get a DAI loan out. But they preferred this particular way of doing it with legal entities and agreements and so forth. So what it is basically a loan on term, as in 6 months, 9 months fixed, and it's over collateralized. They have to put 125% of whatever the loan is in ETH and Bitcoins. And we've been adamant about that these collateral needs to lie with a third-party custodian, and we're now negotiating which is the right custodian to go with. And we're allowed to break it at any point. I mean, we can say we want our money back, and if we break it, we have to rebase the interest rate to the 1.5% that is fundamentally in the other program, the MIP 8081. So it sort of says, if you stick with us for the 6, 9, 12 months as agreed, sure, you can get these 5% or whatever is the right rate. And if you decide to cancel any of these tranches, these 3 tranches, well, then we rebase it backwards to 1.5%, because then it's as if you've had basically the money on demand, if you like. So that seemed to be a reasonably fair compromise or a fair deal. So that's really where we are now. I will say they fundamentally, the way this works is that they actually go out and find this collateral in the market, you know, the Bitcoins and the Ether. And since Terra and Celsius fell apart, actually the rates for borrowing Bitcoin and ETH has gone dramatically up, and is in a changing state. And because there is a time from now and until we actually, can execute this particular deal, we had to make, instead of announcing the interest rate that they would give right now, we actually have to announce it much closer to the date of actually executing this, because that's sort of the nature of having these volatile markets. They were having a hard time logging in an exact interest rate now that they would have to commit to in 2-3 months time, because the market conditions changes so much. But we're still expecting the range of 5, maybe even 6% at that point in time. It could also be 4.5, but the fact is that we've put into the MIP that before we execute on this, after all the agreements done, the final terms as the final interest rate and interest rate rebase, those will be announced at that point in time and then put out. And we took this on because we thought this complemented quite well with particularly MIP 65. The rates are honestly, the interest rate is really good. If it's 5%, those are great interest rates. And if it's hard collateralized at 125%, with daily updates, with Ether and Bitcoin, it felt like a good deal to Maker. So that's why we put it forward. Any questions, please? Any questions?
Yeah, and, first off, thanks for coming on, Alan. I guess I wanted to fill in the governance bit a little bit. So made a change to establish a component addition to this MIP. So in terms of how those rates will be set, if this MIP is approved, then about 2 weeks before we're set to go live, we'll put up a governance poll with the exact rates that the Maker community can accept or reject. And Alan, you put in there that basically we can try that 3 times. And if it's denied all 3 times, then we'll just move on and look for other deals.
Sure, exactly.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to open up to questions, comments on MIP 82. I really appreciate you coming on here, Alan, because I know when this was first posted, I was a little confused seeing Coinbase in both 81 and 82. I thought they were maybe competing MIPs, but hearing that they're complementary, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think we can easily say that. So MIP 82, this is, let's call it, this is straight up a profit-seeking venture for them. Basically, this is when they take this loan, they actually intend to lend this money further out for margin lending on their platform, and they will make money on it. There's no other. That's how it works. So this is a money-making piece for them. I think MIP 81 is, as a lot of people probably have already mentioned, seems to be more of a strategic kind, right? As in, it's good to have the relationship with Maker. They're going to pay what, $20 million, $10 million in interest. That's really not a lot of cost. To have 1.6 billion or so on your balance sheet, helps keep the valuation, which has already gone so far down. So MIP 81 is more of a, to me, is a in my view, obviously they could tell me it's different, but I think it's more a strategic one that has a basis in keeping a valuation, or maybe increasing a valuation of Coinbase to some degree. Whereas honestly, this is very much some traders who's saying, are the interest rates right, and can we make money on this? So that's sort of, I guess that's the difference of the two. I could be more honest, I suppose, in this sense.
So I guess one question I have regarding the collateralization of Bitcoin and ETH against this, who's actually going to be checking and making sure these reports are looking good on the Maker end?
Sure. Well, so the way we're structuring right now is in the custody agreement. So a lot of the custodians have a service where they actually check up on the valuations, and they basically value the Bitcoins and the Ether. So we have an independent source of that, and inform us if it goes below 125. And also sends a request to Coinbase to fill it up. And obviously, if they don't fill it up, they start becoming in, they're in breach of their loan contract, and we can fundamentally ask them to pay the loan back or take their collateral. And if that's not even enough, we can then ask them to we can pursue the claim against Coinbase in entire, right? I think this is the only difference between a maker vault really, is that when you've exhausted the collateral that's put up, in a bad case, you could actually continue your claim against the actual company, right? But that would be it. Yep, I think that's it's really simple, this one.
And as Pablo highlighted earlier in the call, this is eligible to be formally submitted next week. So do look out for that. I do see a question coming in from Patrick here asking if the liquidation, should the collateral fall, would that take place off chain?
I'm not sure. So how should I put that? So if in case they are in breach, we take the collateral, and I suppose what we have to do, and this is what we need to decide, we could basically keep the Bitcoin or the Ether, or we need to immediately send them to be liquidated, and hopefully to gain USDC or whatever is the relevant currency, and get them back to Maker. We're trying to keep all of this basically in cryptocurrencies. It's a loan in USDC, etc., and so forth. But we've also put in a parameter that should USDC disappear in value or something bad happen to value, then actually the loan stands in USD. So that's a sort of a second layer of protection as well.
Got another question from Patrick. If you want to read it out, you can now.
I believe it's Bitcoin, not WBTC. I believe that.
And so that might be something to look into in terms of setting up liquidation, since I think you do need to be a KYC'd entity to use the WBTC
so
bridge.
I think if we want to liquidate it, the custodian actually provides that service as well. If we want to, because so that would be it. But otherwise, remember, there is a trust entity that can either take back the collateral and put it into our Bank Signum custody account, or even our Coinbase custody account, and we could liquidate it as that particular entity right there, convert it to USDC or whatever you like. And from there, definitely from both our Coinbase accounts and from Bank Signum account, we'd be able to send it back to the vault address or surplus or where it needs to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess one question on timeline then, right? So if this MIP is submitted for the October cycle, which it sounds like is the intention, voting would wrap up on the 24th, I believe, of October. Assuming it's positive, like how long would this take to get rolling on your end?
I really hope that we could complete this before end of November. A month, because honestly, a lot of the bones are there already, right? We've got the legal structure. We know how connected with Maker, how to make sure that they're the right beneficiaries, how to make sure how all these things are. So it really comes down to getting the right agreements with the custodian and getting complete agreement on the legal agreement. I mean, the loan agreement basically between the trust and Coinbase. So it should be, we're trying to make this as quickly as possible in Maker terms, because it produces really stable income, right? The interest rate, the interest comes in every month. It's sort of a nice way of making sure you have this cash coming in to the protocol. So we're trying to get it done as fast as possible. CS and CS basically and Christians, they've already been involved, so we've sort of pre-discussed it, so we know what to start with. Should this come true and Maker holders think this is a right MIP to move through, we've already sort of prepared matters, so we know what we need to look into.
Wonderful. That about exhausts my questions. We'll make a last call here for for everyone else. Anything else? Comments too? Like we can discuss the MIP as well.
Well, that's fine. That's good.
Yeah, looks like you've been quite clear on. Thanks
Yeah.
for taking the time and coming out and doing this for us.
Great. No, thank you. Thank you for having us. Thanks.
Right on. So I believe that was all we had planned for our discussion segment. We can see a hand from Raphael. Go for it.
Sorry, just a question for Alan. I'm sorry, in the all the activity, I haven't given that proposal as much scrutiny as I should have. But like, I don't understand why would Coinbase do that? I mean, how are they making money on that deal?
So I believe that they borrow this particular collateral, you know, the ETH and Bitcoins at a certain rate. They put that out to us as collateral. They receive USDC from us. That USDC they use to lend out to their customers in their margin lending business. And fundamentally, there is a place where all these interest rates make sense, and yeah, that's the best way I can say it. Actually, borrowing this collateral, this ETH and Bitcoin used to be really cheap. Not a lot of basis point you had to pay for it if you put it out. If you were somebody like Coinbase, it's become a little bit more expensive because of Terra and Celsius completely blew up that particular market, but it's coming quite normally back. So the interest rates are coming down for borrowing this quite well. So yeah, there is just a place in that chain of interest rates and lending between people where it makes sense for them, and as far as I can see, also makes sense for us. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Raphael.
Okay, thanks.
All right, stutter step the exit. But thank you, Alan. I really appreciate you being here to answer questions. Okay, we're like 15 minutes ahead of when we normally end, so I will give one last chance if there's something else someone would like to address rather. Otherwise, we're looking to get out of here a little early. Okay, well, huge thank you to all our guests, some of which agreeing at the last minute so we could cover the latest in maker governance. Really appreciate these calls, all the activity, getting so many questions answered. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Please do keep the discussions going in the forum. Pretty much everything you heard today either has an active proposal or something else that you can respond to on the maker forum. So yeah, please share your opinions with us there. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
Thanks.